A local newspaper in Pennsylvania wanted to know why landlords were still filing evictions during the eviction moratorium, and the results weren't surprising. I'm Tony, and this is Real Estate Investing and Landlord News. All right, so I have an interesting article for you today, and it's coming out of the state of Pennsylvania, where they had the eviction moratorium in place, but evictions were still allowed to occur if they didn't have to do with a loss of rent due to the pandemic. So in that case, they were interested to know why exactly landlords were still filing evictions during this eviction moratorium. And what they found, it surprised them, but it doesn't surprise me, and it won't surprise most other landlords either. But before I get into the article, go ahead, hit the like and subscribe button. Maybe leave a comment down below and let me know what you think you want to see on this channel, okay? I'm going to work to keep bringing you articles about the eviction moratorium, rent control, and every issue that I can find that has to do with landlords. So, this article comes from fox43.com, and it says, "Here's why landlords filed thousands of evictions despite the moratorium," Fox 43 reveals. Let's see what it says. The federal eviction moratorium did little to slow filings amid the pandemic, and debt has piled up on both sides. The moratorium may have helped millions of people who lost their jobs during the pandemic, but it did not wipe away their bills. Despite the moratorium, Fox 43 reveals that landlords filed thousands of evictions against tenants who owed rent. However, these landlords may never see the money that they're owed. Fox 43 reveals obtained a trove of landlord-tenant cases after filing a data request with the Administrative Office of Pennsylvania Courts. From September 2020 through June 2021, landlords filed more than 9,100 evictions in Dauphin, Lancaster, and York counties. So yeah, the fact that they were still allowed to file these evictions, that's a good thing. So Pennsylvania did not completely shut down the eviction courts like a lot of other states like New York did. They just completely shut down the courts. Nobody could be evicted at all. And you had the case of just tens of thousands of tenants who didn't deserve the protection of the eviction moratorium, who now all of a sudden didn't have to pay rent either. And that created a huge mess. But in Pennsylvania, that wasn't the case. So there were still a lot of eviction filings going on, and the article is probably going to dive into exactly why these people were still being evicted. During this time, rent relief programs were being rolled out, and a ban on evictions for non-payment of rent was still in effect. We set out to learn why landlords filed these evictions. Within this 10-month time frame, the Harrisburg Housing Authority filed 25 evictions. "It's nothing that you ever want to do. You never want to evict someone from their house, especially not in a pandemic," said Catherine Wyatt, Chief Legal Officer for the Harrisburg Housing Authority. "They were not rent related. We only filed for reasons that would be other lease violations, like if they had criminal activity on the property." So yeah, the Harrisburg Housing Authority, that's public housing, okay? That is housing that's owned by the government, rented out to tenants at a lower cost, and to keep lower income people housed. And even they were filing evictions. Okay, we're not just talking about private landlords who are out there to make money. We're talking about government housing, and they're like, yeah, we still had to evict people here too. Well, if the government even was having issues with certain tenants, then certainly landlords would also be having the same problems. That's why I had such a big problem in these states where they just completely shut the courts down, okay? We always need a process for being able to remove tenants, especially ones who are committing violent crimes, etc. Due to the moratorium, the Harrisburg Housing Authority could not collect the amount of unpaid rent owed to them, which now sits at more than $520,000. That is from the beginning, basically from when the moratorium was put in place. It's a lot of money, Wyatt continued. It is a similar situation for the Dauphin County Housing Authority. 34% of their rent roll is unpaid. The agency has filed 23 evictions for non-payment of rent since the moratorium was lifted. They expect that number to rise. So even these housing authorities weren't getting paid the rent, okay? We're talking about government agencies, and they had to file 23 evictions. This Dauphin County Housing Authority has already filed 23 evictions since the end of the eviction moratorium because 34% of their rent roll is still owed to them. And you're telling me that private landlords weren't having a problem? Okay, this is ridiculous. This is part of the reason why even government agencies were like, yeah, this is unsustainable. We just can't house all these people for free. You know, people have to be paying something, even to the government, apparently. We definitely saw tenants who had no effect. They had no loss of income. They were either on Social Security or disability, and those payments continued to come, and yet we still saw them falling behind in rent, which was frustrating on many cases, said Leah Eppinger, Executive Director of the Dauphin County Housing Authority. We reached out to the greater Harrisburg area Tenants United to talk with renters who may have been impacted by evictions. We did not hear back. So, yeah, the Housing Authority has people in there who are on Social Security or on disability, and they know that these people are getting checks. They know this for a fact. That's the reason that they even are living in the government housing. Yet the people are still falling behind on rent. What is going on? Okay? What's going on is that we had a bunch of tenants who were taking advantage of the situation, knew that they couldn't be evicted, not even from government housing, and just stopped paying. They were like, hey, we're just going to keep this money, you know, whatever little amount of money that they were required to pay to stay in that government housing. They said, we're just going to keep it. We're just going to pocket it and spend it on something else because you can't get rid of us anyway. Okay? You can't get rid of us because there's an eviction moratorium in place. And so I'm sure the people who were working for this housing authority were very, very frustrated. You know, 34% of their tenants hadn't paid their rent. Okay, completely ridiculous. So I don't really feel sorry for these local governments because they're part of the problem. Okay, if they are the ones who implemented the eviction moratorium that came down from the feds, even though they had questions about its constitutionality and whether it was legal or not. They thought they had good intentions and they didn't mind, you know, all of us landlords getting screwed, but you know, now they're complaining because, oh well, these tenants, they actually had the money. Who cares? Okay, you know, the worst part is the housing authorities run and it uses taxpayer money to keep these people housed, and they can't even pay the little small chunk of rent that they had to pay to this government agency. And oh man, it's a ridiculous situation to even talk about, but I'm not surprised. I am not surprised. Tenants will try to do so much to get over on landlords, even a housing authority. Ugh. Digging deeper through these eviction filings, Fox 43 reveals that thousands of tenants were behind on rent in as many as 15 months and owed upwards of $10,000 each. Those cases are raising concerns about the impact of the moratorium. It may have guaranteed stable housing for millions of renters during an unprecedented year, but landlords could be the collateral damage. Many landlords are saddled with tens of thousands of dollars in rent, money that was meant for retirement, a college fund, or for their investors. They are dipping into savings to pay property taxes, insurance, water bills, and maintenance. There's a lot more to the story than people realize, said Chad Gallagher, co-founder of Home 365, which was formerly known as Slate House Group. And yeah, he's absolutely correct, okay? All that stuff before, you know, there's mortgage payments, taxes, insurance, there's maintenance, there's utilities, and whatever else, okay? There's just so many costs involved with owning a rental property, and they're always, you know, the bills are always due whether the tenants pay or not. And there's only so much emergency reserve that a person can have. Most landlords do not have 15 months of emergency reserves, especially small landlords who only own one, maybe two properties. The property management company filed 320 evictions from September 2020 through June 2021 in Dauphin, Lancaster, and York counties. Their eviction judgments, like those from other property managers, included rent in arrears, court, and legal fees. However, Gallagher said local judges would only hear eviction cases for lease violations that were not rent-related. I think sometimes when people think about a real estate investor, they have this image in their head of this super wealthy individual who owns 500 houses. And look, that's just not the reality, Gallagher said. There's people out there who own a bunch of real estate, but the average person owns one property. And they have a mortgage to pay on that property, and they have real estate taxes, and there wasn't, frankly, a ton of relief for those landlords. And that's exactly why I make these videos, because there wasn't a lot of relief for the landlords. There wasn't a lot of even talking about the situations that the landlords were going through. Instead, we just were expected to pick up the tab so that all these people could live for free, and we had no recourse whatsoever. Now, they are improving the rental assistance programs, but there's so many landlords who still are not going to get a single dime from any of these rental assistance programs. So it was a complete and utter disaster, and I don't ever want to see this kind of eviction moratorium to happen again. So I guess this newspaper, or this news channel was surprised to find out that, hey, there are still good reasons to evict tenants during the pandemic. Okay, there are very good reasons. And even the local housing authority, the government-run housing authority, was evicting people during the pandemic, and they were evicting people after the eviction moratorium ended because they were owed just tens of thousands of dollars in back rent. So this is the reality for a lot of landlords out there, and I hope that they get this through their thick skulls.